You know that feeling when your computer starts acting weird?
Oh, yeah.
It's slow, windows are popping up, and you just get that sinking feeling that something deep in the system is broken.
Right.
Usually you just reboot. But imagine if you couldn't. Imagine if instead someone was actively rewriting the operating system while you were still trying to use it.
That is a terrifying image for anyone who, relies on technology. And honestly, it is the perfect metaphor for where we find ourselves today.
It is Saturday, January 24th, 2026.
Yeah.
And the computer, in this scenario, is the state of Israel.
And the code being rewritten is the fundamental structure of its democracy. We aren't talking about the usual headlines today. Security, borders, the economy.
No.
We are looking at something invisible but foundational. We're talking about a constitutional crisis in a country that famously doesn't even have a formal written constitution.
Which feels like a paradox right out of the gate. I mean, how do you have a constitutional crisis without a constitution?
Exactly.
But we're going to get into that. To help us navigate this, we are deep diving into a brand new report released just this morning by Fareed Novin. It's titled Democracy at Stake, Israel's Judicial Crisis and the Risks of Executive Dominance.
It's a massive piece of work, and Novin really connects the dots here. He takes all these separate events from 2025 and early 2026 laws, firings, protests, and shows us that they aren't random.
That they're part of a pattern.
A larger, deliberate shift in how power works in Israel.
So our mission today is to unpack that shift. We need to understand the new laws, the battle over the gatekeepers, and why a 61-year-old F-16 pilot says the government is now a bigger danger than external enemies.
It's a heavy claim, but the report argues that we're witnessing a fundamental clash over who gets to interpret the rules of the game.
Is it the executive branch, so Prime Minister Netanyahu's coalition, or is it the judiciary?
That's the question.
Okay, so let's start with the rules of the game, or maybe how the referees are picked. The report points to a specific date as the turning point, March 26, 2025. Take us back there. What actually happened?
That was the day the dam broke. The Knesset, Israel's parliament, approved a law to completely overhaul the judicial appointment process.
Now, I'm looking at the vote count in the report. It says the law passed 67-1.
One, yeah.
That sounds less like a democratic vote and more like a shareholder meeting where everyone already agreed. What happened to the opposition?
Well, that 67-1 is the first massive red flag. It wasn't a consensus.
So was it?
The opposition parties boycotted the vote entirely. They walked out. They refused to participate in what they saw as, a sham process designed to dismantle the court's independence.
So the coalition basically voted in an empty room.
Pretty much.
Okay, so they passed it.
Yeah.
But let's get into the mechanics, because I think people gloss over this. It sounds like boring committee math.
Right.
But the report says this specific change effectively captured the courts.
So how did the system work before? Okay, so picture a table with 9 seats. That's the Judicial Selection Committee. Under the old system, to appoint a Supreme Court justice, you needed a supermajority.
A supermajority.
You needed 7 out of those 9 votes.
7 out of 9. And who was at that table?
A mix. You had politicians from the government, politicians from the opposition, judges, and representatives from the Israel Bar Association. The math was set up so that neither the politicians nor the judges could get to 7 votes on their own.
So if I'm a right-wing politician and I want a hardliner, and you're, say, a liberal judge, we're stuck.
Exactly. We're forced to talk. We're forced to compromise. We have to find a moderate candidate that we can both live with.
The system was designed to force consensus.
Yes, and prevent radicalization.
Right.
But the new law, it changed the math.
Drastically from the looks of it.
It lowered the threshold from 7 votes down to just 5, a simple majority.
Okay, 5 out of 9 seems way easier to get. But just lowering the number doesn't guarantee control, does it? Unless you also change who's sitting in the chairs.
And that is exactly what they did. This is the capture part. The new law kicked the Israel Bar Association off the committee.
They were kind of the professional buffer, right?
They were. Lawyers who were there to ensure candidates actually knew the law, regardless of their politics.
So the professionals are out. Who replaced them?
Political appointees. The new committee now includes an attorney selected by the coalition and one by the opposition. But when you do the head count, the ruling coalition and their direct appointees now control 6 seats.
Wait, so they control 6 seats.
Just 6.
And they only need 5 to pick a judge.
You see where this goes. The government no longer needs the judges' agreement. They don't need the opposition. They don't need to compromise.
They could just walk into the room, sit down, and appoint whoever they want.
Exactly.
So it shifts the whole vibe from who is the best legal mind to who is on our team.
Precisely. Or the report analyzes this as shifting from a merit-based system to one of political horse trading. But, and this is a critical detail that confuses a lot of people, there's a twist. This new system isn't actually being used yet.
Right, the delay. I saw this in the timeline. They passed the law in March 2025, but the report says the new 5-vote system doesn't kick in until after the next election.
After the election in October 2026.
So why wait?
It was likely a political maneuver, to lower the heat at the time, but it created this strange limbo. Until that election happens, the committee operates under a temporary rule.
That requires what?
Unanimous agreement. All 9 members must agree on a candidate.
Unanimous. In this political climate, that sounds impossible.
It is impossible. And that's the reality right now. It's created a total deadlock.
So what's happening?
There are empty seats on the bench, cases are piling up, and no new judges are being appointed because neither side will agree to the other's candidates.
It's a game of chicken.
Basically. And meanwhile, the Supreme Court has announced that all 11 justices, the full bench, will hear the case challenging this very reform in June 2026.
That is incredibly meta. The court is going to rule on the legality of the law that changes how the court is built.
It is the definition of a constitutional showdown. If the court strikes down the law, the government might just ignore the ruling. If the court upholds it, the court effectively changes its own DNA.
But Novin's report makes it clear this isn't just about the judges. There's a second front in this war, and it's against what he calls the gatekeepers.
Yes. In any democracy, you have these internal checks people whose job it is to say no when the government tries to break the law.
And the most important one in Israel is the Attorney General.
Absolutely.
And this part of the report, it reads like a soap opera. We have to talk about Attorney General Gali Baharav Miara.
The tension there has been building for years, but it exploded in August 2025. The cabinet actually voted unanimously to fire her.
Unanimous again?
Yes. Justice Minister Levin sent this 85-page letter outlining the reason.
85 pages? I've sent some long emails, but an 85-page firing letter? That is thorough. What on earth did he accuse her of?
He threw everything at her, derailing government policy, blocking legislation, refusing to represent the government's position in court.
Okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm a minister elected by the people to implement a policy, and my own lawyer keeps telling me, no, you can't do that, isn't that obstruction?
That is the core conflict. In Israel, the Attorney General has this dual role. Yes, they advise the government, but they are also the guardian of the rule of law. Their job isn't to say, yes, minister. Their job is to say, minister, what you are proposing is illegal.
So her defense was basically, I'm not blocking you for fun. I'm blocking you because you're breaking the law.
Exactly. She argued that if she just rubber-stamped everything, the government would be above the law.
So they fire her, but she's still in office, right? How did that happen?
For now, because the High Court stepped in. In December 2025, just last month, the court annulled her firing. They called the decision hasty, baseless, and said it was done without proper process.
And here is where it gets really scary. Usually in a democracy, if the Supreme Court says, you can't do that, the government grumbles, but they do it.
Right. That's the social contract. You might hate the referee, but you accept the call.
But that's not what happened here.
No. Communications Minister Shlomo Karhi publicly declared the court order invalid. He just vowed not to obey it.
That is wild. A sitting minister openly saying, I will not listen to the Supreme Court.
This is what political scientists call institutional defiance. It's one thing to pass a law changing the rules. It's another thing entirely to simply ignore the rulings of the highest court.
Once you do that,
you're challenging the very concept of the rule of law.
And the report lists other proposals on the table right now in January 2026 that seem to be doubling down on this.
Oh, they aren't stopping. They're proposing to split the Attorney General role into 3 separate positions, all political appointments. They also want to remove ministerial legal advisors from the AG's oversight.
So instead of an independent lawyer telling a minister, you can't do that, the lawyer would be appointed by the minister.
Exactly. They would answer to the Director General, who is also a political appointee. It turns the legal advisor from a watchdog into a lapdog.
It really feels like they are removing the referees from the game one by one. But this isn't just happening in Parliament. The report talks about a ripple effect hitting the media, even the military.
The media landscape is facing immense pressure. The report notes that Israel dropped to 112th place in the World Press Freedom Index in 2025.
112th. That is a steep drop. I mean, that puts them in some pretty rough company.
It does, and it's driven by specific actions. There was the vote to shutter Army radio, which is winding down by March. They're moving to privatize the public broadcaster. And there's this ban on foreign media deemed harmful to security, which has been extended to 2027.
And Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't exactly sitting down for tough questions, is he? The report says he hasn't given an interview to the main broadcasters in over 4 years.
Correct. He accuses them of brainwashing the public by refusing to engage, and by attacking their credibility, he delegitimizes the press as an institution.
So if you can't control the message, you kill the messenger's credibility.
Precisely.
But if the press is one pillar, the military is the foundation. Especially in Israel, everyone serves. It's the people's army. And that section of the report, it really stopped me in my tracks.
It absolutely affects national security. The IDF relies so heavily on reservists, pilots, intelligence officers, cyber units. These are people with day jobs who volunteer to serve.
And the report mentioned that back in 2023, nearly 10,000 reservists threatened to refuse service.
And that sentiment hasn't gone away. It's festering.
There was a quote in the report from an F-16 pilot. It gave me chills, a 61-year-old veteran. He said, "I came to the conclusion that this government is the biggest danger Israel faces right now, more than any external enemy."
When you have senior intelligence officials and pilots, the backbone of Israel's defense warning that the overhaul is eroding operational readiness, that is a crisis. It affects morale. It affects cohesion.
It's a breach of contract, isn't it?
Yeah.
The soldier says, "I will risk my life for democracy," if the country stops being a democracy.
Then the contract is void. And the report mentions that Israel's enemies are watching this internal division very, very closely. They see a distracted, divided Israel as a vulnerable Israel.
And the rhetoric isn't helping. I mean, the language being used by government officials against the judiciary. It's not just, "I disagree." It's visceral.
It is incredibly harsh. Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, for example, he attacked the Supreme Court President, Yitzhak Amit. He called him a violent, predatory megalomaniac.
A predatory megalomaniac. That sounds like something out of a comic book, not a statement from a finance minister about a top judge.
And then he threatened to crush him.
Crush him.
Yes. Over 100 retired judges issued a statement calling this incitement. They're genuinely worried this kind of language creates an environment where physical violence against judges becomes a real possibility.
So let's zoom out. We have the courts being sidelined, the gatekeepers fired, the press squeezed, the military protesting. What are we actually looking at here? You mentioned earlier there's a term for this.
The term is executive aggrandizement.
Okay, let's unpack that. It sounds fancy, but what does it mean in practice?
It's a pattern we've seen elsewhere, most notably in places like Poland and Hungary. It's not a sudden coup where tanks roll down the street. It's a gradual process where a democratically elected government uses legal means, laws, votes, procedures to dismantle the checks on its own power.
So they use the tools of democracy to undo democracy.
In a sense, yes. The pattern the report identifies is capture, neutralize, and delegitimize.
Walk us through those 3 steps.
First, capture. You take over the institutions. That's the Judicial Selection Committee we talked about. You change the math so you can put your people in the seats.
Okay, capture. Step 2.
Neutralize. You remove the oversight. That's firing the Attorney General, or ignoring court rulings, or stripping legal advisors of their independence. You make it so no one can blow the whistle.
And then step 3?
Delegitimize. You paint the opposition, the media, the protesters as enemies of the state. You call them traitors, anarchists, elitists. You convince your base that these institutions aren't protecting democracy. They're stealing it from the people.
And the world is watching this, right? This isn't happening in a vacuum.
Not at all. Israel has always prided itself on being the sole democracy in the Middle East. That status is crucial for its diplomatic relationships, especially with the West. If that erodes, the diplomatic cover shrinks.
And the report mentioned something about the International Criminal Court, the ICC. I want to make sure I understand this connection because it sounds like a really big deal for the soldiers.
It is a massive deal. This is about a legal principle called complementarity.
Complementary. Break that down for us.
Okay, think of it as a shield. The ICC is a court of last resort. Their rule is, if a country has a strong, independent judicial system that can investigate its own soldiers and politicians, we will step back. We respect your sovereignty.
So as long as the world trusts Israel's courts to do their job, the ICC stays away. The Israeli court is the shield protecting the soldiers.
Exactly. But if the world decides Israel's courts are no longer independent, If they're seen as just puppets of the government, that shield disappears. The ICC says, you can't investigate yourselves honestly, so we will do it for you.
So by weakening the court to get more power, the government might actually be exposing its own soldiers to international arrest warrants.
It is a massive strategic gamble. You are trading international legitimacy for domestic control.
That brings it right back to the soldier on the ground. It's all connected.
Hmm.
So looking at the timeline, we are barreling towards a climax. The report highlights some specific dates coming up. Why is this period so tense?
Because everything is coming to a head. In June 2026, we have that Supreme Court hearing. All 11 justices will hear the challenge to the judicial reform law.
And Justice Minister Levin has already said he's prepared to play hardball.
Hardball is putting it mildly. He's warned he would advance laws declaring the court's decisions void. So imagine the scenario.
Yeah.
The court rules the law is illegal. The minister says the ruling is illegal. Who do the police listen to? Who does the army listen to?
It's a constitutional crash.
Exactly. And assuming the government lasts that long, we have the Knesset elections in October 2026.
So the election becomes a referendum on the very nature of the system.
It does. And right now, today, the government is already in violation of court orders on the military draft of ultra-Orthodox men. The executive is pushing forward, the judiciary is trying to hold the line, and the system is in a state of effective deadlock.
It feels like two trains speeding toward each other on the same track, and neither conductor is reaching for the brakes.
That is a very accurate and very worrying description.
It's heavy. It's really heavy. But it's important to understand, this isn't just politics as usual.
No.
This is a rewrite of the operating system.
It is. To summarize, the report from Novin argues that we are witnessing a systematic dismantling of checks and balances. Judicial capture, media control, defiance of the law, these are the ingredients of democratic backsliding.
And I want to close with a thought from the report.
Yeah.
The expert quoted there, Yanni Vrosny, said something that really stuck with me.
Yes. He said, when capture fails, they weaken and delegitimize.
Meaning, if you can't take over the institution, you just break it so it can no longer check your power.
The strategy shifts from controlling the game to burning down the stadium.
So here's the question we want to leave you with today. It's something to mull over as you watch the news coming out of Israel in the next few months.
If democracy democratically votes to remove the checks on its own power, at what specific point does it cease to be a democracy? Is it when the law passes? Or is it when the government refuses to obey the court?
That's the deep dive. Thanks for listening. Keep learning.